from Renaissance-style chateaux, grand country estates, architectural glass masterpieces.
These are the remarkable homes
Simply breathtaking.
and magnificent landmarks
One day, my son, all this will be yours.
at the very heart of Britain's spectacular history.
I have never seen one like this.
Join me
I need to get there. With all speed. Onwards, driver.
and a host of celebrities
Oh, crikey.
with a passion for the past
Kaboom! Wish me luck.
as we travel the length and breadth of the nation,
It is between the walls.
and with unparalleled behind-the-scenes access.
From the highest heights
Now I'm through my blind panic.
to the deepest depths.
We'll uncover the secrets
my goodness.
still hidden within these breathtaking buildings.
These are the places that nobody else gets to see.
And explore the riches
How spectacular.
and treasures of one of our most loved institutions.
This is an amazing story. Come on, I want to know the end. I want to know the end.
Welcome to the secrets of the National Trust. Deep in picturesque Dorset lies one seriously elegant and eye-catching property. A glorious country mansion that's seen more than its fair share of excess, scandal and adventure. This is Kingston, Lacy. It was home to the royalist Banks family, who built it after their nearby home Corfe Castle was besieged and brutally destroyed in the English Civil War.
The family lived here for over 300 years after Sir John Banks acquired the estate in the 17th century. But it was only when his great-great-great-grandson, William John Banks, inherited the house in 1834 that things really started to get interesting.
William led the life of a well-to-do dandy. He adored travel and he loved to shop. But the house was always his greatest passion. No expense was spared as he decorated it in his own flamboyant style and filled it with weird and wonderful artifacts that he found on his adventures.
His extravagance was abruptly brought to a halt when a scandal engulfed him and he had to flee Britain to escape the death penalty. But rumour has it he used to sneak back to visit his beloved Kingston, Lacy.
By exploring his grand house,
This is elaborate in the extreme.
laying bare the fascinating story of his adventures,
He went into Egypt and then into the Holy Land, up into Greece, back into Egypt.
He was all over the place.
Yes, absolutely.
discovering ancient secrets hidden in plain sight,
We're looking at something that's approximately 2,000 years old.
Goodness me.
shedding light on the scandal that led to his banishment,
He was caught in Green Park in flagranti.
and uncovering clues in letters written on the run.
Nothing can be more unfortunate than the manner in which the saloon dado doors have been painted. Don't you love it?
I'll discover an incredible character who left an astounding imprint on the house he loved.
He was irrepressible, wasn't he?
Also tonight, Oz Clarke's at Corfe Castle on the trail of William Banks' battle-hardened ancestors.
How did she know how to defend her castle?
Alison Hammond gets hands-on with Kingston Lacy's oldest residents.
Is he enjoying it? He wouldn't still be standing there if he wasn't.
And in an artistic scoop, Joan Bakewell follows a Kingston Lacy painting that could just be a masterpiece.
It all begins to point towards Titian and his studio.
Closer and closer we're getting.
William John Banks inherited Kingston Lacy in 1834. An eccentric and creative man, he spent much of his life travelling, collecting art and mixing in high society. But he adored his grand house and was determined to make his mark by transforming it to reflect his own extravagant tastes. The National Trust's Bernie King is letting me in on the secret inspiration behind his grand design.
Bernie, the first thing that strikes you when you come in is this glorious fireplace. He clearly wanted to make an impression on the visitor.
Absolutely. He moved the entrance hall from the side. He dug down 8 feet and created this magnificent entrance out of what were the cellars. He had visited Italy in the footsteps of his university friend Byron.
What a boast. I was at university with Byron, you know.
Exactly. And he fell in love with the place, and he wanted to transform his family home into an Italianate palazzo.
I'm looking at these with holly on the top, absolutely intricately carved and moulded.
He had a fine eye for detail, and he knew what he wanted.
And above the fireplace, a massive great coat of arms. So it was about family too.
Absolutely. The first thing that you see when you came through the front door would be the Banks family coat of arms. But if we go up here, I can show you something even better.
William's relatives built Kingston Lacy in the 1660s. Their original Dorset bolt hole was Corfe Castle, but when royalists and parliamentarians went head-to-head during the English Civil War, the Bankses' loyalty to the king left their old home in ruins. William devoted one quiet corner of the house to a celebration of this heroic chapter of his family's history.
Oh, my goodness, look at that. So this is William's welcome to my house and my family.
Yeah,
What's he trying to say here?
Well, he was very proud of his ancestry. So his ancestor, Sir John Banks, was the son of a Keswick merchant.
Is that him?
That's him there. He was the Lord Chief Justice of the Common Pleas and the Attorney General. Not bad for a lad from Keswick.
In any other clan, John Banks's incredible rise would be the family's proudest achievement, but he's always been overshadowed by the fearless defender of their home, Corfe Castle.
They were clearly royalists, this
Yes.
family, hence Charles I on his throne above Corfe Castle.
That's correct, yes.
So we've got a bit of history going on here. This is presumably the storming of Corfe Castle.
It is. It's the siege of Corfe Castle, and this is Sir John's wife, brave Dame Mary.
Why brave?
Because while Sir John was serving with the King in Oxford during the English Civil War, she was bravely defending the family home at Corfe Castle.
Is that her?
That's her over there.
Why has she got a key in her hand?
A very significant fact was that after the castle was taken, they looted it, but they allowed her to leave alive because she'd been so brave, carrying the keys of Corfe Castle.
But nothing in it?
Nothing in it, no. She's got the keys, but not the doors.
The keys survive to this day and are kept in the library here at Kingston Lacy. And the ruins of the old home, Corfe Castle, have remained as a monument to the heroism of Dame Mary. Oz Clarke has travelled south of Kingston Lacy to what's left of the castle to unlock the little-known story of its demise.
So you're Pam, are you?
I'm Pam, yes.
I'm Oz.
Please come in, have a look, it's fabulous.
From the moment you arrive at Corfe, you immediately sense the mystery in these ruins. Historian Pam White is taking me back to the 17th century when what we see today was the fortified country home of Sir John and Lady Mary Banks.
How did they come to acquire a castle like this?
Lady Banks inherited some huge amounts of money, and one of the places they'd obviously had their eye on for quite a while was Corfe Castle as a country home.
But Mary's inheritance hadn't bought them any old house. This was a full bells and whistles medieval castle with all the fortifications a 17th century aristocrat could wish for.
So if you weren't invited for dinner, don't think you'd get in?
No,
wouldn't?
absolutely not, no.
Now, what's in here?
This is the guard room, quite luxurious. There's a fireplace. And down here you've got a cruciform loop for the crossbows. But also, if you have a look, you've got a fantastic view of the Outer Bailey. It's a medieval CCTV camera.
You can see 180 degrees out there.
Yeah. They bought it as a home. It was the most beautiful home. It just happened to be a castle.
But the defences were going to come in handy.
Very handy.
7 years after the Banks family bought Corfe Castle, the English Civil War broke out. For 9 years, the king's followers battled it out with the supporters of parliamentary rule. Commonly known as Roundheads, the parliamentarian forces were quick to target the royalist Banks, and in 1643, they arrived at the gates of Corfe.
So castle's now under attack. How do Sir John and Lady Mary go about defending themselves?
Well, Sir John is travelling with the king. So Lady Banks comes here on her own with 2 or 3 of her children, some maids, gets into the castle, and parliamentarian soldiers surround the castle.
So how did they go from such a lavish lifestyle to the fundamentals of defending their castle?
You just pull up the drawbridge, close the gate, and that's it. No one can get in. 600 men outside the castle, and over 100 were either killed or injured. Lady Banks inside the castle had just had 2 men killed. It's an incredible castle. It's absolutely impregnable.
The siege went on for 13 long weeks before royalist forces rode to the rescue. But the parliamentarians hadn't given up. 2 years later, Corfe was attacked again. By then, Mary's husband had died. Undeterred, she held her own for 48 days.
How was this great castle finally breached?
It was done by treachery. The second siege, 1646, Lady Banks had a traitor in the camp. Colonel Pitman, one of the garrison here, told the garrison that he was going off to collect some reinforcements, but he went to Weymouth, a parliamentarian stronghold, brought 120 Roundhead soldiers just outside the castle. They turned their coats inside out. They got red coats with blue linings. The royalists in the castle have got blue coats. So they creep up to a back door. Somebody says, oh, it's Colonel Pitman with all the reinforcements. And, of course, looking as if they're royalist soldiers, they all pile into the castle. And that's how it was taken.
Brave Dame Mary left with her head held high. The keys to the castle returned to her as she departed. But after their hard-won victory, the Roundheads weren't about to take any chances, and they blew up what remained of Corfe. And here it stands, almost 400 years later, as a reminder of an unlikely Civil War heroine.
She was a phenomenal woman. She was absolutely loyal to her royalist beliefs, to her Catholic Church, and to her family.
I'm in Dorset, home to the private palace of the fabulously wealthy Banks family.
Oh, my goodness, look at that.
The family moved here after their former seat, Corfe Castle, was destroyed by the parliamentarians in the English Civil War, despite being stoutly defended by brave Dame Mary Banks.
Because she'd been so brave, she was allowed to leave alive, carrying only the keys to the castle.
Wow.
But heroic Mary wasn't the only famous family member. Her globe-trotting descendant, William John Banks, brought his sense of adventure to the house by transforming it into an Italianate palazzo.
Oh, my goodness. This is elaborate in the extreme.
The Trust's Alison Sharp has offered to show me the tantalising clues to his personality that lie beneath all this opulence. And nowhere is his love of art and adventure more obvious than in the extravagant room he created to house his Spanish paintings.
What an amazing thing to do.
Yes, it certainly is. William John Banks made this room, which he called the Golden Room.
Well, you can see why. I mean, absolutely everything that isn't a painting is gilded.
It is, yes.
And reflects the light beautifully.
No decorative detail escaped the attention of sharp-eyed William Banks, but few realised just how far he would go to get everything looking just right.
The ceiling, he bought that actually on Bond Street, but it came from Venice.
Imagine going down Bond Street and buying this. Most people buy shoes.
That's right.
The walls are intriguing. They appear to be leather.
That's right. That was an idea he took from Venice. In Venice, they used it instead of cloth covering or wallpaper because of the damp.
Was he regarded as an eccentric?
I think that people were very shocked by him. He was a very charismatic, flamboyant person. He'd got this wonderful taste and wonderful eye and was passionate about art.
For William, decorating Kingston Lacy was more than an excuse to go on a shopping spree. It was also an outlet for his own creativity, and signs of his artistic influence are sprinkled throughout the house, if you know where to look.
Are there any examples in here of his art?
Yes, in fact, there are. The 12 door panels here, which follow the months of the year.
Amazing. Aren't they a wonderful entrance to a room? Absolutely beautiful.
and he had them made in Venice.
So he made up the designs
Yes.
completely,
Yes.
and then had craftsmen there create the panels.
That's right, yes. He kept visiting the workshop again and again to make sure they did it right.
All that attention to detail paid off. The 12 panels, 6 golden for summer and 6 silver for winter, now decorate the 3 doors in the room.
This is a man who was passionate about art.
Absolutely. He was very much in love with Spanish painting, which was unusual at the time. Few other people actually thought much of Spanish painting.
Not very fashionable?
No, not at all, no.
Where did he get his inspiration from?
From his travels, really. He spent a long time from 1813 to 1820 overseas, starting off in Spain, where he was part of the Duke of Wellington's camp. That's where he acquired a lot of the art that's in this room. And then he went on into Egypt, and then back into the Holy Land, up into Greece, back into Egypt.
He was all over the place.
Yes, absolutely. He had a real appetite for it, and he became almost a professional traveller.
Are there particular treasures in here, particular paintings that are especially valuable and important?
Well, yes, I think the Velázquez has to be the most wonderful picture in the room.
So that's a Velázquez?
It is.
Velázquez was a 17th century Spanish painter. His most celebrated work is Las Meninas. Incredibly, Banks thought he'd bought an early version of the painting. Experts now believe it was a copy made by Velázquez's son-in-law. But this canvas is the genuine article.
It's a portrait of Cardinal Camillo Massimi.
Who looks as though he enjoyed a few good meals and a few good glasses
Yes,
of wine.
I think he did.
Velázquez's portrait isn't the only head-turner in the Banks collection. One painting currently absent from the house is the Omnia Vanitas. Many believe it's by the Italian master Titian, but there have always been doubts about its origins. To unravel the mystery, the canvas has been sent to the Hamilton Kerr Institute in Cambridgeshire. Joan Bakewell's followed it there in the hope of finding a masterpiece.
Titian, or to give him his family name, Tiziano Vicelli, is one of the great masters of Venetian painting. And today, his work is worth millions of pounds. But is the Kingston Lacy painting the real deal? To get a picture of the painstaking work that goes into finding out, I'm meeting art expert Rupert Featherstone. It's very nice to meet you.
Nice to see you.
Very nice to be here. Now, you're going to tell me all about this painting, which looks, at first glance, like a Titian. Do you have that reaction?
Yes, definitely. And the point being about this, that it does relate to so many other paintings that Titian is known to have done, in the form of the woman and the way she's looking up, and all sorts of things about the landscape sort of suggest Titian, but there were so many imitators. And then
Even in his own day?
Even in his own day, there were definitely people working in his style.
What can you discover that I can't see with my rather poor eyesight, need of glasses?
Well, just having a strong light, you begin to see there's a lot of little damages, these little speckles, little losses of paint. There's a very big sort of funny patch here that looks like an old retouching. Do you see? It's sort of milky looking.
Yes, I
it doesn't really
yes,
match.
I can see that.
Until we've cleaned it, we don't know if that's because of damage or whether it's because of repaint or whether it's exactly what it is.
So what's going to happen to this now?
What we would normally do is analyse the paint, trying to see what's in it, what's its layer structure, what's under the surface, are there any alterations? This is where we start doing the technical analysis. And the first thing we did was to take an infrared image, and what infrared shows, it shows there is a faint face.
Now,
right
this
next
is
to
this is the blotch that we...
The blotch covers this area, so that's interesting. That was enough to whet our
But could
appetite.
Titian have been using an old canvas?
He did that a lot. This seems to me that he's changing an existing picture. He was a great reuser and a great reworker, and he often created things as he went along and recreated, and he didn't mind going over what he'd already done.
No, because he knew how good he was.
Well, I think so.
So that's what the infrared showed.
Yes, and the X-ray penetrates right through and hits any lead-rich paint, lead white, that you get in flesh or something like that.
Right.
And lo and behold, we have a face in much more detail. It looks like he developed the face quite heavily and then covered it up.
Extraordinary. Now, there's another, this painting.
This is, yeah.
I'm
This
not
is
at
the
all
detail.
sure about this.
Well, this is where
Closer and closer and closer we're getting.
Yeah. What we're interested in is this shape here.
This is a ghost in the machine.
It is, and we're tantalised by that. But it proves to us that it's an original work of art. It's not a copy. There are ideas changing, change of subject matter. It all begins to point towards Titian and his studio rather than a follower in the 16th or 17th century even.
It's a wonderful narrative, isn't it?
It is.
Modern technology can throw up many intriguing clues to the painting's origins. But before more tests can be done, thick layers of varnish and dirt have to be removed from the Omnia Vanitas. You know, as I watch you do that, through these lenses, it does just look like lumps of dirt. Conservator Alice Tavares da Silva has the delicate job of restoring the canvas to its former glory.
You can see the
I can see the dirt coming off
a little bit.
So if I take this off, it's come blue. It's come
You
blue.
can see the sky passages now emerging from under that very thick varnish, which is now on the swab.
And are you going to give her a good clean?
Absolutely. She's going to be very pale and beautiful, and the whole of the sheet will be very white, white as that little area is already showing us.
It's very painstaking. How long is this going to take you?
6 months.
6
Just because
months?
we have to assess different methods for different areas, we're also going to investigate the technique of the painting, take samples, do some research.
No stone is left unturned in this process. As well as X-raying and cleaning the picture, samples of paint are analysed under the microscope. Rupert and Alice are showing me how it works. We've focused on that little bit of blue sky that you have already cleaned. The best place to take samples from is the brown areas where paint has been lost. So you would take away an infinitesimal small piece of that paint. And what does it show you?
The idea is that if we can compare the layer structure, the components of the ground, with another painting which we know is by Titian, that may give us some confirmation or otherwise as to whether it came from his studio or not. There's not one absolutely magic ingredient which you say, oh, must be a Titian. But if we found a more modern pigment in there, for example, Prussian blue, that would be a very bad sign.
So you take a sample, what do you do with it?
Well, you get the tiny little piece of paint, and I've got one here just to show you. They are absolutely minute.
It's so tiny, tiny, it's like a germ.
It is, and that tiny speck, when it's blown up, you get this sort of image where you can identify sometimes the actual pigments, and that sort of information is very useful.
Do not lose this.
Exactly, exactly. Or sneeze.
So is the painting a masterpiece or not? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. But if, after months of analysis, it turns out to be a Titian, Kingston Lacy's best-kept secret will finally be revealed.
Kingston Lacy in Dorset is one of Britain's most lavish houses.
This is elaborate in the extreme.
Decorated by the flamboyantly creative William John Banks in the 19th century, the house is packed with art and inspiration picked up on his travels.
The walls appear to be leather.
That's right, that was an idea he took from Venice.
Riotously adventurous by 19th century standards, nothing was too exotic for Banks. He roamed the Middle East and North Africa, sometimes in secret, disguised as a Bedouin tribesman, gathering treasures as he went. On one trip, he brought back the mother of all souvenirs, a 22-foot relic of ancient Egypt. Nothing like it had ever been seen in Britain before. The Trust's Bernie King has taken me into the grounds to tell me the little-known story of this unmissable garden feature.
Bernie, what is it?
Well, it's an Egyptian obelisk from the island of Philae. When William John saw it for the first time, it was just lying on its side where it had fallen over.
Why did he want it?
He was an obsessive-compulsive collector, and he really loved his Egyptology. And why wouldn't you want an obelisk in your back garden?
Wonderful. So, how on earth did he get it back?
Well, it was a very tortuous journey. It took 7 years. He hired an explorer called the Great Belzoni to bring it back. When they got it to the jetty collapsed, and it sank to the bottom of the Nile. William apparently turned away and walked away in disgust, so they had to retrieve it from the Nile. And of course, in those days, it was sailing ships, so it wasn't just a matter of loading it onto a cargo ship.
Why is it so important? Because it's got hieroglyphics up it. What do they say?
There's a mixture of ancient Greek and hieroglyph on there. Because of William's classical education, he was able to decipher Cleopatra and Ptolemy.
So if it says Cleopatra and it says Ptolemy, what sort of age are we talking about for this obelisk?
We're looking at something that's approximately 2,000 years old.
Goodness me.
16 years before William Banks found his obelisk, the Rosetta Stone had been discovered in Egypt. The stone was special because it allowed experts to work out how the ancient Egyptian writing system worked. It's famous as the key that unlocked the hieroglyphics code, but the important part Banks and his obelisk played has never been common knowledge.
How important was William in terms of understanding hieroglyphics?
Oh, absolutely vital. There was a gentleman called Champollion who was working on the Rosetta Stone, and he knew of William's work and wanted to incorporate it into his own. If it hadn't been for William, they probably wouldn't have cracked the code as quickly as they did.
He obviously knew how precious the obelisk was and was determined to have it. When it finally got here, William wanted to make a grand statement, so he called in a favour from his friend, the Duke of Wellington.
It must have caused quite a stir when it arrived.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's not every day you get an Egyptian obelisk coming to Dorset and the Duke of Wellington coming to lay the foundation stone. He actually lent them a gun carriage that was used in the Battle of Waterloo to transport it from the docks, and it took 19 horses to bring it here.
What a sight that must have been. And here it sits in Dorset as the most wonderful garden ornament.
You don't get any better than that.
You don't, do you?
Scholar, adventurer, artist, collector, even for a 19th century aristocrat, William Banks was unusual. But after years of exploration and discovery, scandal struck. With his life hanging in the balance and the future of his beloved house under threat, William was forced to make a heartbreaking decision. Banks' biographer, Anne Sebber, is at Kingston, Lacy to tell me more.
So what was the scandal?
Well, he was caught in compromising circumstances in Green Park, in flagranti, with a soldier, and he was charged with indecent assault. Now, indecent assault carried the death penalty. Don't forget, homosexuality in Victorian England was illegal. He could have been hanged.
Had this been William's first brush with the law, he may have got away with it. But a few years earlier, he'd been caught with another soldier. This time, his chances weren't good, and he knew it.
So what did he do?
Well, he was not young enough to run away by the time the police caught him. And in his desperate haste, he gave a false name. He said he was only Mr. Harris, a gardener. But they found...
Well, impugning the profession, I have to say. I mean...
Yes, shouldn't have said that to you, I realised. He thought that would help him.
I must remember it, actually. I'm only a gardener. Get me off all kinds of things. So what did he do?
Well,
I've been given a false name.
And he was charged, he was given bail, and he did a runner.
Persecuted for his sexuality, Banks fled abroad to Italy, leaving his beloved Kingston Lacy behind and spending the last 14 years of his life in exile. But it was far from being the end of his love affair with this house.
What did he do when he was in exile?
Well, I wish I knew precisely, because there was no address. He was terrified of giving an address because he didn't want to incriminate his family. But what is clear is that this period made him, going into exile, forced him to collect for this house that he loved. He sent ideas back and little bits of gilding, and he hoped they'd fit here and there, and all those details actually mattered to him.
During his long banishment, Banks left Kingston Lacy in the care of his siblings. But it seems probable that love for his house eventually overrode fear for his own life. And ever the adventurer, he returned to Kingston Lacy in disguise. At least, that's the rumour.
How do you know, then, that he came back later on in his life?
I think there are a few letters which really make it clear that he couldn't bear any longer, that everything he'd been so determined to have precisely so just wasn't quite happening. So he thought, I'm going to come back.
In those days, arrest warrants couldn't be issued on Sundays. Rumour has it that Banks took advantage of this loophole, travelling across the Channel on an early morning ferry and returning to France by midnight on Sunday. But it's his hidden letters that give the most intriguing hints of those secret trips.
Tiny, tiny writing.
Oh, takes forever
to translate it, yeah.
decipher this spidery brown handwriting, but you can actually see from the letter he had so much to say. So if you can follow me here. Nothing can be more unfortunate than the manner in which the saloon dado doors have been painted. White in a cold aspect, such as a north room, has the worst effect possible. I had particularly directed that only a wash in distemper should have been given to the woodwork in that room.
This is a man who clearly had been here. There's no way you could get that from somebody describing something.
No.
This is intricate criticism.
I absolutely agree with you. And, you know, he's so cross with his brother George. So here's the critical phrase. But what is worse than that? It appeared to my eye that the plaster cornice round the saloon, which was, of course, never intended to be painted, but to remain pure white and gold, had been picked out with the same abominable colour. Don't you love it?
He saw it.
Of course.
He definitely saw it.
His brothers must have dreaded the arrival of those demanding letters, but they're not the only clue to his undercover visits.
I just love looking at these two niches. Just have a look. There's a cherub, a mermaid, candelabra at the top. Probably Banks found these separate pieces, sent them all back, told his steward to put them together somehow and paint them all gold.
But it's not the statues that give the game away, it's the marble wall behind them. In Exile, Banks picked up odds and ends of marble, but never enough of one colour to finish the job.
Because there wasn't enough. He wrote a letter to his steward saying, well, just cut it more finely. And in this letter, he says, do it how I showed you from the box that I showed you. And that, to me, is real proof that he came back.
Marble cutting's not the kind of thing you can learn from a letter, so it does seem likely that Banks returned to teach his steward how to do it, risking his own life in the process.
He was irrepressible, wasn't he? He couldn't stop thinking about this house. He couldn't stop accruing this legacy. And it's a shame, really, that he seems just to be associated with sex and shopping.
By the late Victorian era, Kingston Lacy was owned by his grandnephew, Walter Banks. Packing a house with art and putting an ancient monument in the garden is a hard act to follow, but Walter still managed to make his mark. Presenter Alison Hammond is roaming the estate in search of the secrets of his four-legged legacy.
Now, normally I like to interview celebrity humans, but today I'm on the grounds of Kingston Lacy to meet some very famous cows.
Walter, or Squire Banks as he was known, introduced a herd of red North Devon cows to Kingston Lacy in the 1890s. And their descendants are still chewing the cud today, under the eye of the Trust's Nigel Chalk.
They've got the most beautiful colour, haven't they?
Yeah, I think that was what was special to the Banks family, Squire Banks especially. He really got into the colour, and as you wander around the estate, there's 100-odd cottages, and they've all got what we call Banks's red doors.
Walter was so crazy about the cows that he even ordered that the servants' livery should be changed to match them. And that was just the start of his obsession.
I can't believe they've all got their own individual names and those names have been passed down. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is, and it's really special. You know, it keeps that link going. Like the one that's led right down there looking towards us, that is one called Vixen the 12th. and you can trace the family of Vixen right back to the 1920s.
So they're all related?
Yeah, they are.
Walter's son, Ralph, left Kingston Lacy to the National Trust in the 1980s. There was just one cow-sized catch.
Mr Banks was really firm in his will that the herd was to stay, and something the National Trust was more than happy to do. They're as important as some of the pictures hanging on the wall.
From day one, the Kingston Lacy cattle were scooping up prizes at livestock shows, a winning streak that continues to this day. But in this game, the stakes are high, and good grooming is everything. Stockman Mark Yendall knows the beauty secrets that make this lot stand out.
Hi, Mark. How you doing?
Hello. Good, thank you.
Who's this, then?
This is Prometheus. He's a 2-year-old bull, and in a minute we'll be giving him a bit of a pressure wash, power wash, and then we'll blow dry him afterwards.
You are joking.
No.
Cows and bulls are treated to a 4-hour-long makeover before each competition.
Is he enjoying it?
He wouldn't still be standing there if he wasn't.
As well as being washed and blow-dried to their fluffy best.
I'm getting into this.
They have their hooves clipped before the final spruce-up with hair gel.
Ooh, look at that. That's great.
I wouldn't say no to this kind of pampering myself.
Prometheus, you are ready for the show.
Kingston Lacy's cows aren't the only reminder of Walter's time as master of the estate. He and his wife Henrietta made a massive impact on the gardens here. She'd proudly show off the grounds to famous visitors like Edward VII and Thomas Hardy, and one of her finest creations, the Japanese garden, survives to this day.
But it was in the kitchen garden where the Banks family spent the equivalent of £100,000 growing fresh flowers, fruit and vegetables to decorate the tables of their Italianate palace.
Walter established the garden in the 1870s in the hope of keeping Kingston Lacy's larders well stocked. I'm meeting senior gardener Steve Candy to see if Walter's plan worked.
So how self-sufficient were the Banks family when it came to growing fruit and veg?
Incredibly self-sufficient. When they were working this area, the total site was 6 acres in total. So they would supply the house here. They had a house at Studland and also the house in London.
So it's supplying 3 households?
Absolutely, and not just that, it would also go to markets.
How much sort of cutting-edge technology did they use?
They wanted to utilise the latest technology, you know, whether that was the latest glass houses or heating.
Stately homes with state-of-the-art greenhouses weren't that unusual in the 19th century, but the kitchen garden here was in a different league.
Did people come and take hints from Kingston Lacy?
Queen Victoria would send her gardeners down here to,
oh, that's
to
impressive.
train. Absolutely. Here and Kew were the 2 places regarded as the sort of horticultural paradise where people could learn and train.
Walter's wife, Henrietta, was determined that the kitchen garden should also be a secret oasis for the family, and so she added lawns, a pond, and even a summer house.
How much of what was here then is here now? I notice you've got greenhouses back there which look pretty much like turn-of-the-century greenhouses to me.
An awful lot remains. Some has been lost, but we do have, obviously, the orchid house, which is probably the crown of our glass house range at the moment.
I started my life looking after Victorian glass houses. These I have to see. Come on.
Absolutely.
Well-off Victorians and Edwardians had a thing for growing exotic fruit in greenhouses. But orchids were Henrietta Banks's real passion, and although her purpose-built orchid house has been restored, it's off-limits to visitors for a large part of the year.
Oh, what a show.
Yeah, they're really looking wonderful this year.
I'm very, very envious of this. Lovely, old-fashioned, slatted lath shading outside.
Yep.
Plenty of ventilation with these dirty, great iron bars that open up the vents at the back.
Yep.
And this wouldn't have been the only greenhouse by any means, would it?
Not at all, and we're very lucky here in the fact that we've got some fantastic plans, you know, pictures and designs that were originally drawn up for the family.
Greenhouses were built here in the 1870s and again in 1907. At its peak, the garden had 8 glass houses. Amazingly, they managed to grow grapes, figs, peaches, pineapples, and of course, Henrietta's beloved orchids.
They were a great status symbol,
Absolutely.
weren't they? The houses of the gentry and the nobility. But
They
they'd
were.
have gardeners who would take a pot like that. Are we going to do this?
I think so.
I haven't done this for a long time. Are you trusting me with this?
I'm trusting you with it, Alan, yeah.
That's a bit worrying, actually. I don't...
Just be
Just
careful,
tearing.
it's part of the original collection, so...
Now he tells me.
I'm dividing up and repotting these orchids, a vital job if the plants are to thrive. Because these orchids are tropical, they're tricky to grow here. But Henrietta's gardeners had obviously hit upon the secret because they produced dozens of varieties.
It's amazing how many you can get.
It is.
And today the Trust has reintroduced about 40 different types based on what was grown here in Henrietta's time.
Will that do you, sir?
Perfect.
How good were Henrietta's gardeners? I mean, did she have a reputation?
Exquisite, I think, is the word. You know, they would show, obviously, at the local events, and it got to a point, actually, where Henrietta had to withdraw from displaying her various vegetables and cut flowers, just purely because she was winning so much.
From merchant son to Civil War heroine to well-heeled Edwardians, the story of the Banks family has never been short on drama. But the one name that will always be associated with their great house at Kingston Lacy is the irrepressible William John Banks.
William was certainly an eccentric, and his lack of discretion very nearly cost him his life. But he was also an adventurer, a classical scholar, and an accomplished artist. And his life's work here at Kingston Lacy remains his masterpiece for us all to enjoy.